God, I'm growing out the sides of my hair while making a YouTube channel, so I look like a doof. Hi everybody, it's Ben. So today we're going to be talking about Everythingunder by Daisy Johnson. This is a debut novel by this author. It almost won the Man Booker Prize, and I have to say I'm surprised it didn't. I'm kind of curious who did win because this book is amazing. Now, I'm more of a classic literature guy. I'm gonna be a classic literature. That's a misnomer. I mean literature of the 1900s. I'm starting to try to go further back than that, but I'm not really much of a contemporary author, mainly because my view of contemporary novels were stuff like Crazy Rich Asians and young adult novels and Ready Player One. Just stuff more pulpy in a sense and just didn't really interest me. But I gotta say, I would almost consider this book a modern classic. It has very beautiful prose and just a very beautiful themes and just a well written story. Now, with this discussion, there are gonna be spoilers. So it's gonna go light spoilers, and then it's gonna go major spoilers because it is based off a myth, and you're seeing an interview by the author, she herself doesn't want that myth revealed, and I can see that because the way it's implemented is incredible. So for the sake of it, I won't spoil the myth until I put a disclaimer. Now, the story of this book is about a woman, the main character, finding her lost mother, who's been out of her life, and the woman, I forget her name, but she grew up in just extreme poverty. Like they lived on a boat. It was just next to a lake all the time. Her mother taught her bad English until she grew up, and her mother didn't just disappeared on her. So for most of her life, she didn't have her. So she's going back to this bunk ass town to find her. And the story's in two segments. It's a frame narrative with her finding the mother, but then also the act of her looking for it is one story, and then, well, I guess three segments of the narrative, and then also with her trying to find the father figure in her life who was a friend of her mother, Margaret, Marcus. Now that's kind of confusing, and at first I thought the story in the past was of her mother, Margaret, but slightest spoilers, it's actually Marcus' story. So the mother is Margaret and the mother is Marcus. And I can't say my R, so you're probably gonna get this mixed up. So the thing that's really about this not so I would firmly place this novel in the modernist genre. There was bits of Faulkner I felt in here, and but what I mean by that is that almost like a stream of consciousness writing style. It's not like Ulysses where it's like completely in the first person, but it just has that flow. The author doesn't take you for an idiot. She'll leave out stuff, like much like Ulysses. Like I'm gonna show you the events, and you can piece together what's going on. And I think that's just really great because it just takes a lot of speed bumps. It just really makes the narrative efficient, but also leaves a lot more room for imagery, for integral discussion, and but also leaves a lot more room just for the vividness of the piece to take place also, and just have a bit of a poetic prose to it. And also, theoretically, I believe this is in the modernist canon because, like James Joyce would say, focusing on something specific to show the universal, this book does that. It focuses on a very specific relationship of a poor mother and a poor daughter reconnecting and trying to find an alternate father figure that was in their life also. And that's just a specific situation. There's barely any characters in the book. And it's also focusing on just the core theme of children having to become the parents later on, having to be the backbone, having to be support, not having the support of the parent also. And in most of our lives, for most of us, we will have to deal with that, where when our parents get older, we almost have to take the parental figure, and we lose that support system before they pass away. You can see that so much with the character just wanting to have that mother figure, even though the mother's so far gone and is hurting herself, is causing so much problems with her, is hurting her work also, how much time she had to take off of it, but just wanting to be there, but she's the one who has to take care of the mother now, and just the stress that puts upon her. Also, with other aspects of the book, with like the mother teaching the child, it goes into the theory that this is kind of like in Babel 17's same plot point that the language that we learn also affects how we interpret the world, because the mother teaches her some words and stuff that aren't even real. The daughter didn't even realize until she went to school that, like, oh crap, this is not English. Nobody says these words, and it held the daughter back. And eventually, she did become a dictionary writer, so her vocabulary did expand, and it kind of shows the words that she learned kind of help influence her and get her curious about language as well. Now, a little point I have about that point of discussion is that there's multiple theories out there. I forget some of the philosophers' names, but one of them was kind of used as a racist ideology to show that black urban students weren't as intelligent as their white counterparts because they spoke more of Ebonics, so they had shorter sentences and a more limited vocabulary. But then another philosopher came out there saying, hey, that's not totally correct. They're able to actually say things succinctly, while the white counterparts, especially college grad counterparts, they go on and on and on and repeat the same points over and over again, much like my videos. Now, and there's different discretions about that. There's one by, I believe it's Burke, who points out, like, we almost have a filter in the sense that whatever career or path that we're on, we use a certain lexicon according to that career field. So, if you're a doctor, you say patient, but if you're like an attorney, you say clients, both for the same thing. And then also you have stuff like the Benjamin Wolf hypothesis, which I still have to read, but if you watch Arrival, it'll give you a good idea how language in itself affects the world that we live in. So there's different philosophies. So there's different philosophies out there about that, but generally, in my opinion, language can be described by other words in other languages too. So, like a great example my teacher had is that Eskimos had like 20, I think it's the proper term now is so like when my teacher had an example. So like my teacher had an example, Inuits have about 20 or 30 words for snow, and one would say that people outside of that language is not able to codify that. However, he would say, like, you can describe different forms of snow with other adjectives: slushy snow, hard snow, flaky snow, soft snow. So even though we don't have those words, we can generally understand them by just makeshift definitions and just putting more words together by that sense. But the beautiful thing about what I really like about the different word choice and how it interprets our world is in the sense how, like I said earlier, she recognizes how much it holds her back. And that's kind of like the first knock against her mother that she realizes, where she feels inferior, she feels stupid to the other students because she doesn't speak the same English. Nobody speaks the same English. Yeah, it's special, but it hurts her as well. And another point of the novel is also that of personal fear, personal ideologies, and personal perceptions of reality, in the sense of the bone jock in this story, where it's a mythical, where it's a mysterious lake monster that scoops people up and brings them into the river. But again, it's not like Bigfoot or anything like that. It's not based on any cryptid. It's something like the language is specific to these characters. Now, I'm Mexican, shocker, and going to Mexico and hearing horror stories, when you're out in the rural woods of Mexico, hearing these stories by people who live there, it takes on a totally different perception of compared to just hearing them in America in your home. Out there in the wilderness at night when you're walking back home, that shit is scary. And it just has so much more gravity to it. It just feels so much more real. And you look over your shoulders. You start questioning stuff. It really thins the line between reality and myth, where the myth becomes more realistic. And this setting of having it be in a rural area and seeing the bone knock, and a scene later in the novel where you're like, is it real or is it not? That might seem silly just on paper, but when you're in that situation, those things do seem a lot more real. And it also just shows the personal relation between the mother and daughter, where the mother affects the daughter so much that she's almost seeing this mythical creature. Now, whether it's real or not, leave comments, because I'm not too sure, to be honest. Because there is one scene, spoilers, where they kill it later, and they take it apart, and it's like, that was pretty detailed. Is this real now? So, but if it is or not, just how the mother entraps her into her own personal world and her own personal mythology and ideology, and how much that just sections off the daughter. And I guess thinking about it now, the killing of the Bona can also be shown as the separation between the lessons, the killing of the lessons that the mother taught the daughter. Now, another point of the book I want to bring up that the author does really well, and I'm surprised of, is, and she even mentioned in an interview, she wanted to try to write older characters. She was used to writing younger characters. She's around 28, like I am. I think she's a little older, but she's used to writing like this age group, this age demographic. But writing people closer to in their 50s and 60s, she wanted to experiment with, and I think she largely succeeded because I used to work at a Social Security law office, and seeing older people who are disabled, she nailed it. The portrayals of her mom in this book and of other individuals who are kind of almost on the vagrancy side of life. Like, there's two people, Laurel and Ralph, and they own a home with a lot of kids, but they're like, they're not vagrants, but they're just right on that line. And seeing these characters depicted, it is very accurate. She got that down to almost a T, and people do act like this in the world. You'd be surprised. And if you're not surprised, you've seen it. And now, next, we are going to get into a major spoiler section. So if what I've talked about interests you in the book, read it. I highly suggest it. But now, 3, 2, 1, the myth this book is based off is the myth of, damn it, the myth that this book is based off is the myth of, fuck me, man. Orpheus? No. The myth this book is based off is the myth of Oedipus. Now, but it's reversed. Now, it goes into this, and how that happens is that Marcus, throughout the book, you're reading his backstory, you're kind of wondering who this is, or you think it's the mother like I did. It's because it starts off as female, and she eventually transitions. She transitions because, she recognizes life is hard. She has to live in the world, and she decides it'll be easier being a man. And she eventually does become a man, in the sense that she doesn't get any surgery or anything, but she tapes her breast, she starts dressing like one, and she starts analyzing how men walk around, and she gets it down pat where she's passable. Now, this is a very interesting idea of gender fluidity, where it almost seems like the initial decision is almost incidental, but then once she's in it, she's disgusted by her body and her female parts. Or his female parts, my apologies. And I like that. I like how fluid gender is in the book, and also showing, because there's another trans character that she's friends with, but also showing how just because they're trans doesn't, it still shows the human side of them. It doesn't make it seem like, oh, look how great trans life is or anything. And it's not anti-trans by any means, but it's like, no, this is a very human view. This is a book about humans. Yes, there's trans representation, which is great, but we are still going to show the struggle these people have, because it doesn't make them, because it doesn't exclude them from tragedy. And just like with the straight characters in the book, the straight males and the straight females, everybody is subject to tragedy, everybody is subject to their own, and everybody is subject also to poverty as well. So it's just a very humanistic look at this book. So it's just a very humanistic look at the human perspective, regardless of gender as well. Now, again, going back to the myth, Marcus eventually has sex with Margaret in the book in the past. But then at the end of the book, it's revealed that Margaret had another daughter that got swept away by the lake. This other daughter, it's not explicitly said, it's Marcus. Marcus has sex with her own mother. And the way it's done, especially for a myth that's so common that everybody learns about in high school or just even knows in passing, even if you never heard the actual myth in itself, it took me by surprise. I did not know it was going to be about that myth, and she really just hides it and reveals it towards the end. But to be completely honest, it doesn't feel cheap. It doesn't feel like some big twist. It's a shocker, but it doesn't feel like an M. Night Shyamalan cheap shocker. Because even though the reveal that she had another daughter comes at the end of the book, it doesn't. It just flows so perfectly and beautiful, and it helps that the character herself has dementia, is mentally not sound. So why would she bring stuff up like this to her daughter, who was the second born? And why would the second born even know about this? Because she had him, she lost it before she even had her. And so the book, and that brings up another point with the writing style of the book. I probably should have talked about this first, but the book doesn't assume you're an idiot. It really goes these. But that also, what really helps that flow also is the writing style, in that it was, and also really helps is that the writing style, in that it doesn't take you for an idiot, like I said earlier, in that you have to piece together some of the aspects of this. Like, hey, I can sit here and describe everything without getting in the way of the prose, and I can describe every single event that's happening, but a lot more can be inferred by you seeing the sequence of events. You're not stupid. You got this. Almost like the book Ulysses. It's not explicitly said in Ulysses that Martha is cheating on Leopold Bloom. I almost said Hell Bloom, but you see him reading the letter, and you put that information together. And I think that writing style is infinitely more satisfying, just because once you piece it together and once it's shown, and once you get into the rhythm of it, and you're not taken aback by it, it's just so much more efficient and just leaves a lot more room to focus on other things, like the character, like it's just so much more efficient and just leaves so much more room for the author to play around in. So, Everythingunder by Daisy Johnson. Amazing book. I'm really looking forward to her next novel. I'm going to be keeping an eye on her. I was really impressed by this. Again, it reminded me of stuff like Sound and Fury by Faulkner, but it just had this really beautiful, almost lucid, dreamy quality, but also it just really got into the dirt of it. Actually, a similar book is Another Suck Night in Bullshit City, but I feel this book is just a lot better. Another Suck Night in Bullshit Night in Suck City is like the male version of this, where it's about a man reconnecting with his father. I might do a review on that later, but this book is just a great example of how there is a scene in contemporary literature, how contemporary literature should be taken seriously. And if you're like me and kind of want to jump more into it, but you don't want to read Ready Player One, I would recommend Everything Under by Daisy Johnson. Thank you so much, and this hair's got to grow faster.